Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki jai, Gaunitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Good morning. We're reading from Canto 11, Chapter 4, the very last verse, text 23, and then we'll proceed to the next chapter, which is entitled Narada Concludes His Teachings to Vasudeva, and that's Canto 11, Chapter 5, and we'll do one text, the first text. So, text 23 from the 4th chapter. Evam vidhani janmani karmani cha jagat pate purini puri yashaso vanitani mahapuja evam vidhani janmani karmani cha jagat pate purini puri yashaso vamitani mahabhuja evam vidhani janmani karmani cha jagat pate purini puri yashaso vanitani mahabhuja. Please chant. Evam vidhani janmani karmani cha jagat pate purini puri yashaso vanitani mahabhuja. Evam vidhani janmani karmani cha jagat pate purini puri yashaso vanitani mahabhuja. Evam vidhani janmani karmani cha jagat pate purini puri yashaso vanitani mahabhuja. Evam vidhani janmani karmani cha jagat pate purini puri yashaso vanitani mahabhuja. Thank you very much. The word for word, of course, these are all translations and no purport, but translation and then leading into the introduction done by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. So for this verse, Evam vidhani, just like these, janmani, appearances, karmani, activities, cha and jagatpate, of the Lord of the universe, purini, innumerable, Bhuri Yashasa, very glorious. Vanitani, described. Mahabhuja, O mighty armed King Nimi. And the translation, O mighty armed king, there are innumerable appearances and activities of the Supreme Lord of the universe, similar to those I have already mentioned. In fact, the glories of the Supreme Lord are unlimited. And this ends the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to the 11th canto, 4th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Drumila explains the incarnations of Godhead to King Nimi. And then we're proceeding to the next chapter 5. So I'm going to begin by reading as best I can in the very poor light of the introduction to chapter 5, all of 2 pages. So in this chapter, the destination of persons with who are inimical to the worship of Lord Hari, who are unable to control their own senses, and who are not peaceful, is examined, along with the different names, forms, and modes of worship of the personality of Godhead in each yuga. From the face, arms, thighs, and feet of the primeval person, Lord Vishnu, are born correspondingly, and in order of the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance, the 4 varnas, brahmanas, and so on, and also the 4 different ashrams. If the members of the 4 varnas and 4 ashrams do not worship Lord Sri Hari, who is himself directly the origin of their own creation, they will simply fall down. Among these classes, women and sudras, who generally have no contact with the hearing and chanting of Hari Katha, are, on account of their very ignorance, special candidates for the mercy of great souls. The members of the other 3 varnas, becoming fit for achieving the lotus feet of Hari by second birth through Vedic initiation, nevertheless become confused by by concocted interpretations of the Vedas, presuming themselves to be great scholars, although not understanding the essential meaning of karma. They become flatterers of other deities in their greed for fruitive results and ridicule the devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They are fixed in family life, attached to mundane gossip, and indifferent to the devotional service of Vishnu and the Vaishnavas. They are maddened by material opulence and pleasures, devoid of real discrimination and intelligence, and always function on the mental platform. But such attachment to family life and so on is most natural for the mass of people, even though it is against the best advice of Shastra. To become disentangled from such life in all respects is the principal teaching of the Vedas. Real wealth is that conducive to the faithful execution of the duty of the soul, and not that which must simply, which exists simply for selfish sense gratification. As a consequence of the desire to indulge the senses, men and women couple together to produce children. Engaging in animal slaughter, apart from that necessary for performance of sacrifice, these human animals themselves suffer violence in the next life. If because of excessive greed for one's own pleasure, one commits violence against living beings, he is also attacking Lord Sri Hari, who is present in the bodies of all living entities as the Supersoul. Opposed to Lord Vasudeva, ignorant self-cheaters completely carry out their own ruination and enter into hell. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Hari, accepts in each of the different yugas various colors, names, and forms, and is worshipped by various prescribed processes. In such a yuga, the Supreme Lord is white in complexion, has 4 arms, dresses as a brahmachari, is known by such names as Hamsa, and is served by the practice of meditational yoga. In Tetra Yuga, he is red in color and 4-armed, is the personification of sacrifice, is characterized by the symbols of the sacrificial spoon, ladle, etc., is called by such names as Yajna, and is worshipped by Vedic sacrifices. In Dwapara Yuga, he is of dark blue complexion, wears a yellow garment, is marked by Srivatsa and other signs, has such names as Vasudev, and is worshipped in his deity form by the regulations of the Vedas and Shastras. In Kali Yuga, he is golden in color, is accompanied by associates who are his primary and secondary limbs and his weapons, is absorbed in Nam Sankirtan, and is worshipped by the performance of Sankirtan Yagya. Since in Kali Yuga, all the goals of human life can be achieved simply by the glorification of the holy name of Lord Sri Hari. Those who can appreciate the real essence of things praise Kali Yuga. In Kali Yuga, many people in South India, Dravida Desha, in places where the Kirtamala, Kuveri, and Mahanadi rivers flow, will be dedicated in the devotional service of the Supreme Lord. Persons who give up all false ego and take full shelter of Lord Hari are no longer debtors to the demigods or anyone else. The personality of Godhead, Sri Hari, appears in the hearts of devotees who know no other shelter than him, and causelessly drives away all evil desires from the devotees' hearts. Maharaj, Vidyaharaj Nimi, having heard elaborate descriptions of Bhagavad Dharma from the mouths of the Navayogendras, offered worship to them with a satisfied mind. They then disappeared. Devara Narada thereupon instructed Vasudeva about the ultimate shelter of devotional service. He told Vasudeva that although Lord Krishna had become his son, having appeared in this world to free the earth of its burden, he still should not think of Lord Krishna as his child, but rather as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even by meditating upon Krishna in a spirit of enmity, such kings as Shishupal attained an equal status to him. So to attempt to say anything more about the perfect achievement of great souls such as Vasudeva, who enjoy intimate loving relations with Krishna, would be a useless endeavor. And then proceeding to text 1. Shri Rajavacha Bhagavantam Harim Prayo Na Bhajanti Atma Vitama Tesham Ashanta Kamanam Kanishta Vijitatmanam. And the translation for text 1. King Nimi further inquired, "My dear Yogendras, all of you are most perfect in knowledge of the science of the self. Therefore, kindly explain to me the destination of those who, for the most part, never worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead Hari, who are unable to quench their material desires, and who are not in control of their own selves." And the purport. In the 5th chapter of the 11th canto, so that's this chapter, Chamasa Rishi describes the inauspicious path of those who are unfavorable to the devotional service of Lord Vishnu. And the sage Karambaja explains the Yuga Dharma avatars, the incarnations of the Lord who present the authorized process of religion for each different age. So that's the summary of what's coming up. So, before I begin, there's more purport? Okay. In the previous chapter, it was explained that although the demigods place obstacles in the path of the Lord's devotees, by the mercy of the Supreme Lord, the devotees are able to place their feet on the head of such obstacles and thus pass beyond them to the supreme destination. However, for the non-devotees, there is no such facility. As soon as the conditioned soul becomes indifferent to the devotional service of the Supreme Lord, he is immediately attracted by the temporary varieties of matter and becomes a slave of inauspicious desires. Thus, the conditioned soul, devoid of devotion for the Lord, completely forgets the transcendental bliss of the spiritual world, which is enjoyed in 5 transcendental rasas. Although the devotees are not overcome by the sense gratification offered by the demigods themselves become absorbed in material form, taste, and smell. And similarly, those who are non-devotees also become bound by material form, taste, and other sense perceptions, such as the sensuous experience of sex life. Thus, they remain hovering in a dreamlike state, imagining different types of material sense gratification, and forget their eternal relationship with the personality of Godhead. Vidyaraj Nimi now inquires from Chamasa Muni about the goal attained by such bewildered persons. Om Jnanatimidandasya Gyananjana Shlakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sagana Ragutam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitam Sha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagat Pate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radha Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priyam. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnebhyo namo namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimad Ram Padaswami iti namine. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami iti namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nivishesha Sunyavadi Paschacha Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I'll just read the verse again. King Nimi further inquired, "My dear Yogendras, all of you are most perfect in knowledge of the science of the self. Therefore kindly explain to me the destination of those who for the most part never worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, who are unable to quench their material desires and who are not in control of their own selves." So just beginning with Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and his looking at this particular text, he states that in this 5th chapter, Charmasa describes the condition of those who do not worship the Lord, and Karambhajana describes the Yuga avatars. So that's the basic summary of what's coming up in this chapter. So Srila Vishwanath, he continues, surprised that some people reject the Lord of great fame, who is known through his appearance, which takes place by his mercy, King Nimi asks a question. O knower of Atma, what is their position? What is their destination? So there are pastimes that, I should put it this way. There are practices that facilitate attaining the Lord. And there's a description of such practices in the mode of goodness. Because we'll take it as a given that these questions that are being asked by King Nimi are looking at persons that are functioning under the modes of material nature, because they're rejecting the Lord. So turning to practices that facilitate attaining the Lord in the mode of goodness, Lord Krishna paints this picture of such persons. And these persons become controllers of their mind. So this is, in the mode of goodness. These persons become controllers of their mind, and they're not attached to objects that gratify their senses. And they're free from experiencing the sense of being attached or experiencing hatred in their activities. Because that's the nature of the mind. It vacillates between this kind of loving or hating. So there's a category of persons who are not experiencing that. They actually are able to control their minds. And this is how Lord Krishna puts it. So he paints a picture of this whole category of persons functioning in the mode of goodness, being purified by his intelligence and controlling the mind with determination, giving up the objects of sense gratification, being freed from attachment and hatred, one who lives in a secluded place, who eats little, who controls his body, mind, and power of speech, who is always in trance, and who is detached, free from false ego, false strength, false pride, lust, anger, and has an acceptance of material things, free from false proprietorship, and peaceful. So quite a listing. Such a person is certainly elevated to the position of self-realization. So all of these things are taking place, and you can see it's a very internal process. It's very much to do with reigning in the mind, and then some control of the senses, eating little, controlling one's speech, and then, of course, the picture one has of oneself, keeping that in control too, meaning the egotistical side, and not believing that one has such great strength, being very conscious of the internal work that needs to be done. So those persons functioning in that kind of way, which is a mode of goodness way, this is what Lord Krishna's conclusion is, they're elevated to the position of self-realization. So that's from Bhagavad Gita in the 18th chapter. So Lord Krishna, he describes, or he had previously described, how the Varnashram system purifies one of one's conditioning. And this that I've just read is an explanation of when one gives up prescribed duties. So it's actually progressing even beyond the Varnashram system. So a person takes up Jnana Yoga, and he's not driven to act by the modes of nature. And thus he's able to pursue spiritual life through inactive meditation. That's how it's explained. So by this process of Jnana Yoga, one purifies oneself by the use of intelligence. By analysis and discrimination, one frees oneself from identifying with the body and one's mind. So you can see there's a lot of thinking that has to happen, a deeper understanding, and that's what's actually allowing for that separation, that identification with the body and the mind. So in this way, one becomes liberated from material nature. So that's, just everything that's involved in the mode of goodness or functioning in the mode of goodness, and even going beyond the Varnashram system. So if one backtracks and looks at the conclusion of Vedanta, actions directed by the supersoul bring freedom from reaction. So an understanding needs to be there that one is, that this is merely one, that one oneself is merely one of the 5 factors in any action that's done. So in fact, there are 5 causes for the accomplishment of any action. So I'm looking at all of this because I'm considering these questions, or we're going to hear what comes in response to King Nimi, but just as a starting point, what comes from these questions being asked of persons, who don't actually reject the Supreme Lord and, have no regard for that, but continue functioning basically under the modes of material nature. So I'm looking at how actions take place. So there are 5 causes for the accomplishment of any action. That's again the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So this is how it's described. The place of action, meaning one's body, the performer, the person who chooses that action, the various senses, because you need to utilize the senses in some way in order to be able to perform an action. The many different kinds of endeavor. There has to be different kinds of effort that are made in order to accomplish something. And ultimately, the super soul. These are the 5 factors of action. So Srila Prabhupada explains that the soul within the body is acting to bring about the results of activity. And hence, it's known as the doer. And it's able to achieve the particular action by using the senses, which are the instruments. So the soul acts in various ways, and it's different efforts for any action. But all one's activities depend on the will of the super soul seated within the heart. And the super soul is functioning as a friend. So taking this into account, it means that any person who's acting outside of the modes of nature, but acting in consciousness of Krishna under the direction of super soul, is not bound by any activity. So that's the difference. I mean, we heard that the person who's actually functioning in the mode of goodness is actually has that advantage of being able to be promoted to the path of self-realization, and ultimately they achieve that freedom from being bound by material nature. And of course, the person who is actually functioning outside the modes of material nature, or at least is directly connected to the will of the super soul, that person is not bound by any activity. I mean, there isn't the reactionary nature or the reactions coming from the activity that's being performed, that utilization of the senses as the instruments, the various endeavors that are made, the action that's finally performed, because it's actually directly lined up with the will of the super soul. So the pivotal point is then made by Lord Krishna. This is what Lord Krishna says. Because again, in the background are these questions that are being asked by King Nimi. Whatever right or wrong action a man performs by body, mind, or speech is caused by these 5 factors. So there's the thing. There's still the problem of, is it a right action or is it a wrong action? There's an ethical component to everything. And Srila Prabhupada makes the distinction between right and wrong. It's very simple in terms of work. So this is what Srila Prabhupada, how he makes the distinction. Right work is work done in the prescribed direction of the scriptures, and wrong work is work done against the principles of scriptural injunctions. So it's very straightforward. So here the question being raised in the current text is, what is their position? So those persons that, basically are performing actions, but they're rejecting or not wishing to acknowledge the Supreme Lord. What is their destination? So immediately in Lord Krishna's breakdown, where the material cause is the place, the worker, the endeavor, and the senses, the final cause is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So one who doesn't see basically doesn't see the Supreme Lord thinks himself to be the doer. So that's actually the propelling force for everything. And that's, taken into account these questions by King Nimi. Those persons who do not see the Supreme Lord think themselves to be the doer of all these actions, or any action that's done. So the utilization of the senses, the concepts that are held of themselves, the various efforts, the circumstances in which something takes place, the person operating in that way who's not seen the Supreme Lord is thinking of themselves as the person who's doing the action. So these are Lord Krishna's words, which describe the position of such a person who doesn't see the Supreme Lord. This is how Lord Krishna puts it. Therefore, one who thinks himself the only doer, not considering the 5 factors, is certainly not very intelligent and cannot see things as they are. That person is, in fact, a fool because of impure intelligence. So one may say that such a foolish person is, in fact, blind. There's spiritual blindness. So the question that's raised is, what is the destination? So this means of persons who reject the Supreme Lord or fail to acknowledge him. So if karmic propensities are used in the dutiful service of the Lord through Varnashram, then one will advance towards being liberated from material entanglement. So the Varnashram system is arranged so that actually one's moving progressively towards that kind of surrender to the Supreme Lord, that kind of coming to understand his presence within the heart and operating according to his will. So if one is actually utilizing whatever one's karmic propensities are in that kind of way through the Varnashram system, one does become liberated from material ensnarement. But Lord Krishna, in doing a breakdown of the kinds of knowledge, action, and the performer of action, he notes that, and it's in inverted commas, the knowledge of common men is always in the mode of darkness. Because every conditioned living being is born in the mode of ignorance. So this is quite startling when you really think about it, that common men are actually completely in the mode of ignorance, because the understanding is that one is born in ignorance. So if one continues without that not functioning within the Varnashram system or not having an understanding of scriptural injunctions, then one basically is functioning in the mode of darkness. And one who does not develop knowledge through the scriptural injunctions has knowledge that's limited to the body. So one can only see in relation to one's own body. So Lord Krishna paints that picture, and this is what he says, these are his words. And that knowledge whereby one is attached to one kind of work as the all in all, without knowledge of the truth, and which is very meager, is said to be in the mode of darkness. So constantly that emphasis on being in ignorance and just seeing one kind of work. There's no conception that the work has a relation with actually allowing for elevation of consciousness. It's just actually seeing the physical work and identifying oneself with that work. So Lord Krishna says it's a very meager kind of outlook. And it's in the mode of darkness. So Srila Prabhupada explains the concept held by such a person. So because generally persons are holding concepts when they're functioning. So this is Srila Prabhupada's explanation. This mode of darkness and this basically the knowledge that persons are operating with, where they don't actually see the connection of their work with elevation of consciousness. So here's how Srila Prabhupada explains the concepts that are being held. For him, God is money, and knowledge means the satisfaction of bodily demands. And Srila Prabhupada generalizes further, such knowledge has no connection with the absolute truth. It is more or less the knowledge of ordinary animals, the knowledge of eating, sleeping, defending, and mating. So it's quite startling, isn't it, that how narrow the world is, being in the mode of ignorance or functioning under the mode of nature of ignorance. So this can be contrasted, of course, with that knowledge by which one sees that in every different body, there's a different type of living entity. So this is a concept that the material body is the living entity. So with the end of the body, the consciousness is also destroyed. So that's part of that thinking. And I was going to comment a little, but I may go off into a different direction, so I won't. This is knowledge in the mode of passion. So the body itself is the soul. That's how it's understood. And there is no separate soul beyond the body. So this is, even in the mode of passion, how there's not that conception of a spiritual being that's functioning within the body. The body and the soul are viewed in the same way. So then it means that when the body is destroyed, the consciousness is also destroyed. So even in the mode of passion, this is the view. There isn't that kind of spiritual outlook and that connection with the Supreme Lord, or considering the following of scriptural injunctions. So the body itself is the soul. That's the understanding. And this is explained by Srila Prabhupada. So there's no separate soul beyond the body. In the mode of passion, that's the view. So consciousness is temporary, actually. That's what it comes down to. I have a brother who is somewhat atheistic, but grew up because we were both sent to private schools. So he had many years under Catholic priests. So his particular view is very much this mode of passion kind of view, that actually there's no separate soul beyond the body. So consciousness is destroyed when the body is destroyed. And I find it very interesting that, 12 years of exposure to Catholic priests has led to this mode of passion outlook. So in contrast to is the mode of goodness knowledge. So here's the mode of goodness knowledge. One undivided spiritual nature is seen in all living entities, even though they're divided into innumerable forms. So the external form is different, but there's an understanding that actually there's an undivided spiritual nature. So this is mode of goodness view, very different. So if one considers the Vedic injunctions in terms of the path that is outlined, one can consider a question asked by King Nimi. And this was a question he asked. It was in the 3rd chapter. He said, we wish to learn about this illusory potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Vishnu, which bewilders even great mystics. So he asked that question, there has to be some illusory potency that causes all this bewilderment. So the response he received from the Yogendras is the following, and it highlights Vedic injunction, indicating the path that needs to be followed. So this was the response he received from the Yogendras. Childish and foolish people are attached to materialistic, fruitive activities, although the actual goal is to become free from such activities. So it's called childish and being foolish. Therefore, the Vedic injunction indirectly leads one to the path of ultimate liberation by first prescribing fruitive religious activities, just as the father promises the child candy so that the child will take the medicine. So it's interesting. Fruitive religious activities are prescribed to help all these persons with their very limited, so-called, in inverted commas, knowledge of the soul in relation to the body. So here's Lord Krishna explaining this particular point. At Bhagavad Gita 2:45, Lord Krishna says, Triguna Vishaya Veda Nishra Gunyo Bhavarjuna Nirdvandvo Nitya Sattvasto Niryoga Shema Atmavan. The Vedas deal mainly with the subject of the 3 modes of material nature, O Arjuna. Become transcendental to these modes. Be free from all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self. So that's pinpointing, Lord Krishna pinpointing what the Vedas are mainly dealing with, the three modes of material nature, and that the fact that they offer fruitive results within the three modes of material nature. So, but he's advising that one needs to endeavor to become free from the modes of material nature, because always, if one's under the mode of material nature, there's anxiety for gaining things. There's an anxiety for being safe. But if one becomes established in the self, the soul that's connected to the super soul, then this falls away. These anxieties fall away. So the Vedas do offer these fruitive results within the three modes of material nature. So those who perform ritualistic ceremonies or austerities in the mode of goodness are offered the chance for promotion to the higher planetary system, Swarga Loka. Those who perform karmakari or fruitive religious activities, the mode of passion, are allowed to become great rulers of wealth, or they enjoy great prestige, all on the earthly planet. But the Manu Samhita states this, and this is was found because of Srila Prabhupada's quoting it, not that I'd read the Manu Samhita, but it states, although fruitive religious activities are very much popular amongst the conditioned souls, the actual perfection of life is achieved when one can give up all fruitive endeavor. So there's room that's made for persons in the mode of ignorance, the mode of passion particularly, because the mode of passion persons are actually interested in this fruitive religious activities. But the actual perfection of life is achieved when one can give up all fruitive endeavor. That's the point of the Manu Samhita. So, of course, in Vedic rituals, Lord Vishnu is worshipped. Thus, one is gradually promoted to hold an understanding that one's actual self-interest is to surrender to Vishnu. So it's subtly there, and it may not be in the consciousness of persons who are actually impelled by this notion of gaining. But every time some ritualistic religious activity is performed, is worship of Lord Vishnu. So gradually they come to have this understanding that actual self-interest is surrendered to Lord Vishnu. So in terms of the question of the Lord's incarnations, because that was the other question, there's a statement that's made by Devahuti to Lord Kapila, which explains something of the Lord's incarnations. And this was from the 3rd canto, the 35th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam. Devahuti says, "My dear Lord, you have assumed this body, referring to Lord Kapila Dev, in order to diminish the sinful activities of the fallen and to enrich their knowledge in devotion and liberation. Since these sinful people are dependent on your direction, by your own will you assume incarnations as a boar and as other forms. Similarly, you have appeared in order to distribute transcendental knowledge to your dependents." So the Lord appears whenever there are discrepancies in the discharge of duties or the real purpose of their discharge of duties. Then the Lord appears as an incarnation. So living entities are conditioned to try to lord it over material nature. But in course of time, they become so degraded that they need enlightenment. That's actually the point. So the many incarnations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, like those of boar, fish, tortoise, half man, half lion, appear on the surface of the earth to give transcendental knowledge to misguided, conditioned souls. So the degradation has to be quite extreme, but that's when the Lord appears. So the result of these incarnations appearing is that there is spiritual advancement of persons who see the Lord face to face And even those born in families of dog eaters, like I guess it's known that in Korea that's the land of dog eaters. I don't know where else they are, but immediately such persons become eligible to perform Vedic sacrifices. Immediately they become eligible just by virtue of the Lord appearing. And particularly if the person utters the holy name of the Supreme Lord, or chants about him, or even hears about him and his pastime, or even offers him obeisances, or even remembers him. So that's the extraordinary thing, even in the most degraded condition, just by virtue of the Lord appearing, because that's the question that's been asked about the different incarnations. Persons actually become eligible to start performing Vedic sacrifices when the Lord appears, just by them remembering him, hearing about his pastimes, etc. So this was an attempt to look at, just as a beginning entry point into what's going to be explained in detail in this chapter, but just the thoughts that came in an examination of the questions being posed to King Nimi of what's the destination and what actually happens to persons that don't accept or acknowledge the Supreme Lord. And of course the question of these particular incarnations, what is their purpose? So this is an attempt to look at, just as a starting point for a very detailed examination of these questions in response to King Nimi's question. So if there's something that's come to mind from trying to look at this, please feel free to expand the discussion.
Shivala, you have something? There was one part in the summary of the 5th chapter given by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, in which there is a sort of description, the structure of the Varnashram, and making the point that if the Varnas and the Ashrams are not used or are not engaged in the worship of the Lord, then is useless. We hear that through the Bhagavatam. And the description of the structure in which it says that women and Sudras, in general, they don't have in that structure much opportunities of hearing and engagement in hearing and chanting the scriptures and the glories of the Lord like that. And then says that makes them very, very suitable candidates for the mercy of the Lord. That's one thing that it says. And the other one is that the other 3 Varnas are, they receive Brahminical initiation. They have, they're qualified to receive Brahminical initiation, which implies that the other 2 are not. The Sudras and the women are not. And then it made me think, because there is a presently in ISKCON there is a faction of, if within our community of devotees that are propounding these very traditional ideas of women should not receive second initiation. And And of course, there's other factions of devotees that says, that are very opposed to that. And Prabhupada gave second initiation. And there is also, and of course, there is this, there's the expression there, and Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that those who have that take birth in the Papa Yoni, the sinful birth, and he is actually very much inclined to give his mercy. So even if you take birth as a Sudra, as a woman, or as a Vaishya, you still qualify to receive the mercy of the Lord, as expressed here. So one thing that is, in this controversy that is part of, in some circles in ISKCON, when you single out woman, but here it's not just women, it's women and Sudras. And then we know the statement in the Shastras that says that in Kali Yuga, everybody take birth with the qualification of a Sudra. What is it? What is that? Kalo Shudra Samplabo. That in the age of Kali, everybody appears with the qualification of a Sudra regardless, meaning that everybody have to be trained. And you brought it there too, that in your presentation, that even if you're a dog eater, if you're properly trained, that's as part of the Pancharatra Viti, if you train, then you immediately qualify to engage in Brahminical activities. So one wonders, obviously there's the Vedic presentation of this Varnashram structure and how it should be. And we have the task, in one sense, ISKCON have the task to re-establish Varnashram in the world. It's part of completing what Prabhupada left us to his followers, to complete, part of the mission that he has to establish that. How that properly translates into Kali Yuga. So you have this faction of devotees that if we're going to establish it, you have to establish, the traditional thing. So hence, women should have the position of the woman, and they're considered not qualified to receive a Brahminical initiation. But on the other hand, how do you apply to Sudras, to the majority of people who are born influenced by the mode of ignorance and passion, including those who comes, from Brahminical backgrounds like that. So it's quite something, I guess, as we go deeper, as you say, into this chapter, it will be very interesting to understand and to start to try to get the essence, the principles, in one sense, of this spiritual, social structure that Krishna gave us. And in one sense, is part of our service to contribute to the proper understanding of how to establish some sort of a social structure, even among our communities like that. So, some thoughts on this matter.
Thank you, Prabhu. I was also having a same thought on that, but I will ask a question on this. As Prabhu rightly said, Prabhupada's desire was to establish Varnashram system in ISKCON. It was his desire, and he said that in future, so it may happen. And devotees are trying their level best to implement this Varnashram system in our society. But the problem with the Varnashram system, if it succeeds, woman will be sent off of the altar. Woman cannot enter into altar then. The reason is that according to Varnashram system, women are not allowed. So even Brahmanical initiation will be barred. Brahmanical initiation for the women will not be acceptable in Varnashram system. So if this kind of results or this kind of things that are going to happen because of the establishing of the Varnashram system, how then Prabhupada is expecting to establish Varnashram in this society? Because traditional Varnashram means women are not allowed Brahmanical initiation, women cannot enter into deity room. These are the traditional facts of Varnashram system. So how we can reconcile with ISKCON today and ISKCON with Varnashram?
So the very controversial issue has been raised that there's a current movement which is Subal highlighted, that women may not be eligible for Brahmanical initiation. And Sri Ballabha reinforced that it falls into the traditional model of the Varnashram system, that women don't have the same, I guess, opportunity. Well, you pointed out that it involves some factors in deity worship, a woman being excluded from some factors of deity worship, some part of deity worship. Yeah. So, and there was the implication that if a Varnashram is established within ISKCON, then this would be the implication that one portion of the society is suddenly not going to have access to one part of the Varnashram system, meaning the Brahmanical aspect. So, and Subal pointed out that in the purport here, or not the purport, the introduction to the chapter, emphasis was put on the fact that women being lumped with Sudras, and I guess maybe that's the traditional part that Sri Ballabha is referring to, that women don't actually have that same, I guess, social allowance for hearing about the pastimes of the Supreme Lord, because the emphasis was put on being able to hear, and that's equivalent to persons functioning as Sudras. So, but that this made them especially eligible to receive mercy. So that was the introduction to this chapter. So that would seem a little contradiction, because emphasis is being put that they become particularly eligible by virtue of their status to receive the mercy coming from Varnashram, and yet here the emphasis that's been put is that possibly in the future establishment of Varnashram within ISKCON, women won't be having that space being given for being incorporated into the Varnashram system, particularly receiving Brahminical status. So it would seem there's a contradiction between what we've just read in this introduction to the chapter and the proposed idea of a traditional Varnashram system. So one has to take into account something of the fact that we're Gaudiya Vaishnavas and the particular, I guess, I'm not going to use the word allowance, but maybe it is correct that the most prominent Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, actually made room, special room, so I guess allowance, if one takes the traditional view into account, for women to indeed receive Brahminical initiation. And there's many parts, sometimes this comes up, that it seems contradictory, some of the views that Srila Prabhupada expresses, that women are less intelligent, but then on the other hand, they are being granted second initiation, which is really the position of a societal leader. So one of the things that always comes across to me personally is that Srila Prabhupada makes a distinction between a regular person in a female body versus a person who's actually taken to the path of self-realization. So that distinction then puts the category of persons in a female body who've taken to the path of self-realization in a special category. It's not the regular mass of women. It's persons who've taken to the path of self-realization who have chosen the path of controlling their minds, using their intelligence, controlling their speech, utilizing their senses in the service of the Supreme Lord. So it's a different category of persons in a female body. So that's what I'm understanding. So persons who have, in a female body, who have taken that that responsibility and are proceeding on the path of self-realization do not fall into the regular category of the mass of women. So therefore, it's a category of persons that are entitled to receive second initiation as brahmanas who are leaders of society, because that is, they're performing the functions and engaging in the practices of self-realization. So I've come across different parts where Srila Prabhupada has put emphasis that these are not regular women. So that's how the understanding is. It's persons who've chosen to go beyond functioning just under the modes of material nature, but have decided to take to the path of Krishna consciousness and be aligned with the will of the Supreme Lord. So it's a very elevated path, and proper regard needs to be given to any person, even if traditionally the female body is not viewed as, being capable of going down that path, but clearly that's not accurate. And Srila Prabhupada acknowledged that and made space for it. So you could say that, okay, did he make that allowance because of a cultural difference that exists coming to a country such as America and Europe? I mean, different continents, so not just a country, but different continents that didn't have a history of an ashram system, whereas in Asia, or India in particular, there's historical reference at least to a Varnashram system, not that it's been practiced. So does it make it more correct then to backtrack to a time when the so-called traditional Varnashram system excluded women from Brahmanical initiation, or should one actually take it to our current Acharya who actually made space for women to have that privilege of an ashram system if they proceeded on the path of self-realization to go beyond the modes of material nature, because the Varnashram system is still having persons function in the modes of material nature, but being able to perform ritualistic activities that allow them to come to an understanding of taking shelter of Lord Vishnu. So it's still a lesser system than being on the path of self-realization and practicing Krishna consciousness. So that has to be taken into account. So the Varnashram system within ISKCON, it's interesting because if you're talking about Sudras in general, because that's the current demographic in Kali Yuga, what we read, that everyone is born in darkness and ignorance, so, of a Sudra mentality, then the special allocation of a Varnashram system that is acknowledging that there are categories of persons, Vaishyas, Kshatriyas, Brahmanas, is correct, because now one is actually functioning on a higher level on the path of self-realization. So those qualities start to emerge, even though they're very mixed. That's the nature of Kali Yuga, that in one person there may be Kshatriya and Vaishya qualities, or there may be Sudra and Vaishya qualities. It's mixed in Kali Yuga, but through the practice of, on the path of self-realization, more prominent nature, the nature becomes more prominent, that is the more prominent part of the nature of that particular individual. So it seems that at least on a sort of microcosmic level, it becomes possible to talk about Varnashram, even with that mix in each person, because the path of self-realization is so powerful that the prominent nature becomes possible. But then to still try and reference Varnashram that is in relation to the modes of nature and the exclusion of woman on the path of Krishna consciousness doesn't seem to be a perfectly correct mixing of models because of the practice of Krishna consciousness. It's an elevation of consciousness, and that should not actually have that, what would be the word, the restriction of body as the criterion for the nature of the particular entity to have the proper space for functioning. So that's just thinking it through logically. So that's my response as best I'm able to think it through.
More thing to ask then.
Yes. It's fine. Still have maybe like 2 minutes.
Okay. See, Prabhupada, when in the summary part, when it is said that women and Shudras should be seen with a mercy, that it indicates mercy means look at them with a compassionate mood and include them rather than rejecting them. So, but when we see about Varnashram as what you have described till now, has to do more with a Bhagavad Dharma understanding, not Varnashram Dharma understanding. Yes, Srila Prabhupada, when he came here to preach, he acted on the principles of Bhagavad Dharma. Yes. He never acted on Varnashram Dharma. And this Bhagavad Dharma gave us so much success, and with the Bhagavad Dharma allows to see the people on the level of the soul
Yes,
with the gunas, but Varnashram doesn't allow that.
that's right.
So my question is that, then why there is a need to establish Varnashram Dharma if Bhagavad Dharma itself is sufficient?
Yeah, you could say that like within a society, there's persons that have business tendencies, there's persons that have more priestly
I
tendencies.
agree.
Yes.
But this will discriminate between men and women again.
Yes, that does
Whatever-
not make sense.
Whatever facilities we are enjoying now in this society because of Bhagavad Dharma, when the Varnashram system will establish, this will all go down. As I said, women will not be given Brahman initiation, women will not be allowed to enter deity room. That will happen because of Varnashram establishment. My thing is that, then why Prabhupada gave so much emphasis on Varnashram, establishing Varnashram in ISKCON? Why not let us continue with Bhagavad Dharma, which is so nice in this present Kali Yuga system?
Well, you could say that the emphasis on the establishment of Varnashram is that as leaders of society, one is actually influencing the broader society. So the Varnashram then is happening in the broader society. I mean, there was a time when it was Bharatvarsha, and so it was the Varnashram system operating throughout the world. So that would seem to make better sense, that the society is influencing the rest of society to such an extent that it's actually gradually falling naturally into a Varnashram system, because operating under the modes of nature, but with the correct focus, that engaging those fruitive tendencies, but performing Vedic sacrifices, so therefore coming to make the connection with Lord Vishnu. So it would seem more accurate to say
I
establishment
agree.
in the broader society.
What you say is true, but because of that, because of people acting in their natural position, the other rules will impact on women. I have objection on that. Why the woman will be barred because of Varnashram system? I agree, Varnashram system will help person to perform the things according to nature, according to choices. That is okay, that part fine. But it will inherently disturb the other aspect, that is woman aspect of in the society. I am saying that there is no need.
That's right. I would agree with that completely, and that was the same argument, because the emphasis is not on the body; it's on the qualities of the person and engaging in the path of self-realization. So that is the important aspect to look at. So indeed, it would seem to demote on the basis of body, when already the process that's been engaged in is one of elevation of consciousness, irrespective of body. It doesn't make sense. I would agree. Thank you. Subal wants to make a last comment. Okay, we may have gone way over time. The article's well on its way, but it's a relevant thing, and it's part of the study of the scriptures, that there's some room for actually making it meaningful what we're actually hearing. So it's very important.
And besides that, is an important discussion for all members to understand, because it's a mandate that we have from our founder Acharya to establish Varnashram. And then to your question, Srivallabha Prabhu, I don't think it's the right comparison or the right, so it's Bhagavad Dharma or Varnashram Dharma. Rather, is Varnashram Dharma is simply a social organization. And we have a community, in one sense, not only for the world out there, for our community, a Krishna conscious society. When you have the word society, you need to have a structure, an organized organization within our society. So the organization of our communities is going to be the example for the world out there of the establishment of a Varnashram system. It's a social structure. So the way to see it, in one sense, is the social structure, we can understand it and apply it according to the principles of Bhagavad Dharma or the principles of Smarta. The Smarta view or the Bhagavad view, the Pancharatrika Bhagavad Dharma view. The teachings of Lord Chaitanya has, emphasized the Bhagavad Dharma, and that's what we learn, which is devotional. So Varnashram have to be seen through that lens, through the lens of Bhagavad Dharma. That's the task that we have. Right now, we have to, in one sense, the how is following our great founder Acharya, who was able to start to plant the seed, at least the principles of how to organize ourselves according to Bhagavad Dharma. So, and in that Bhagavad Dharma space, no one is left out. Everybody could be elevated, as you pointed out, to the position of Vaishnava. And the Vaishnava, then there's a talks about Daivi Varnashram. This is the Varnashram which is governed by this Bhagavad Dharma, which, but it's a little over our heads, at least I can say over my head. But in one sense, we can understand that we have to be careful that this Smarta approach that is very dogmatic and fundamentalist, it really can fire back, and undermine the whole purpose of creating a system that can change the world,
Yes, indeed.
Like
so
that.
we're in agreement.
Yeah.
We are in agreement. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.